You're listening to Power BI and More with Ulrik Carlson. This episode is brought to you by Maplytics by Inogic. Maplytics by Inogic is a market-leading certified for Microsoft Dynamics 365 geo-analytical mapping app. Maplytics empowers users with powerful map visualization and routing capabilities within Dynamics to drive better sales, improve business process, and engage the right customers at the right time. Maplytics now works with Dynamics 365 version 9 and Dynamics 365 app for mobile and tablet. Inogic is a leading Microsoft Gold Dynamics CRM ISV, delivering best-in-class Dynamics 365 solutions, as well as cost-effective and high-quality programming services. We thank Maplytics by Inogic for sponsoring Power BI and More with Ulrik Carlson. We have a special guest here on Power BI and More. This is actually our second special guest we've ever had on Power BI and More.
What?
Ulrik, who do we have with us?
So we have Gus Gonzalez from Elevate Solutions.
How about that? Thank you.
Gus, I'm really glad you're here because in Power BI and More, we have kind of an ongoing campaign to get you to buy Ulrik a HoloLens.
I know, I heard about it.
We had a tweet campaign, and like at least 15 people voted that you should buy Ulrik a HoloLens. And you can use Power BI on HoloLens now, so it's really awesome, and he would be much more effective employee. So have you bought the HoloLens yet?
No.
Right. Much more effective. I would
campaign
not be
is not
playing with it all day, not doing my actual work.
Exactly. Yeah.
All right.
So it hasn't worked out yet.
The other reason you're here is because we have coming up this weekend D365 Saturday Atlanta.
That's right.
So tell us a little bit about what's going on there, what you got planned, and what's going on.
Yeah, so we're super excited about it. Dynamics 365 Atlanta, I guess, or Dynamics 365 Saturday in Atlanta is coming up in a couple of days. And we have, I think, 8 MVPs speaking at the event, which I've never, other than Convergence, I guess, I've never really been on an event here in Atlanta with so many MVPs speaking. And, one of the best things about Dynamics 365 Saturday, I think, is that the event is organized by the MVP community, and by regional directors as well, Microsoft regional directors who are like MVPs. And, the beauty about it is that because I got to organize the event in Atlanta, I started taking out the things that I figure people like me are not really big fans of. Like, for example, long keynotes, right? I'm not a big fan of the 3-hour keynotes and the repetition of those keynotes at every conference and everything, is always the same thing, talking about the feedback loop. And so one of the first decisions I made is no keynote. We're not going to have a keynote. We're just going to have sessions instead of keynotes and get started early on that. And, we invited essentially everyone, professionals or partners and customers to attend. All of the sessions are geared towards people who have been using Dynamics for a while and they just want to go to the next level. And what we did is we invited speakers from sort of all backgrounds. So we have people like me, for example, who focus more on the business outcomes and solution architecture side of the picture. We have people like Ulrik who focus on the business intelligence side. And then we have developers like Andrew Butenko and David Yak who are going to be talking about development stuff. We have Sean Tabor coming and talking about field service and resource schedule optimization and all that stuff. So you have sort of like these world-class experts on their particular subject delivering sessions about that. So you can, if you're a developer, you will have tons of things to learn about. If you're sort of a new functional consultant or an administrator, there will be a bunch of sessions for you about that as well. So I'm really, really excited about it. We have almost 100 people registered for the event, which is pretty interesting because the room capacity that we have on Microsoft is 96. So I'm sort of counting on the fact that some people might not be able to make it, and we'll be at capacity at that point. But we're just really, really excited about the event, and we have literally thousands of dollars worth of stuff to give away that sponsors have been gracious enough to provide. And said, Gus, so you can give them away at Dynamics 365 Saturday. So we have a bunch of swag, obviously, t-shirts, stuff like that to everyone attending. And then at the end of the event, I hope everyone stays to the end because we have, like I said, thousands of dollars worth of prizes to give away to people attending the event. So we're really, really excited about it.
Pretty sweet. So what are you going to be talking about, Ulrik?
So at the event?
Yeah.
So at the event, I'm going to be talking about using Power BI and Dynamics 365 together. So kind of what I was doing in Australia too, talking about making that integration tighter and making it more like seamlessly like one application. And then actually this time I have another session specifically dedicated to the data export service. And knock on wood here, I'm going to try and actually set up the entire service using only web applications and web forms. Nothing downloaded, no desktop applications, etc. Using only the web. Set up the entire thing from scratch during that presentation.
On a Wi-Fi.
On conference Wi-Fi.
You're a brave man, and I appreciate you doing that.
So, and I just jinxed it by saying that I was going to try and do it. If I hadn't told anyone, it might have, but I think now it's gone.
Well, great. Okay. Well, and I know we're a day and a half, 2 days away from it now. So can people still register if they are in the Atlanta or the Southeast and say, you know what, I can go on Saturday?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I know that towards or I guess as we get closer to the event, more people will register, and I've seen a spike up on the registrations. Lately on the last couple of days, especially over this past weekend, a lot of people register, and I know that there are people out there that are still sort of waiting to see if something doesn't happen or happen so they can come. So I'm expecting a lot more people to register and a lot of walk-ins as well. I've seen people from all the partners in the Atlanta metro area, and we have people register from Florida, from North Carolina, so people just making the trip, because essentially what you get is the experience of a full-on conference for one day. So in one day you have 3 rooms, you have a ton of sessions going on. I think we have 15 or 18 sessions that are scheduled for that one day. So you get the full conference experience with the catering, with the networking, with everything, and it's 100% free. So for attendees, they don't pay anything to attend this one-day conference. So again, same sort of experience, same quality of presentation, same content for free. So we're expecting a lot of people that will make the trip to Atlanta if they're not already here.
Okay, great. Well, check the notes for the episode for the link if you want to sign up at the last minute here. So Ulrik, what do you have to talk about this week?
So this week we're going to be talking about analyzing processes. For example, your sales stage, like your pipeline processes, moving through like all those qualify, develop, negotiate, close stages on your opportunities. It could also be your service processes or project processes. But generally just data that moves through one stage to another. Particularly, for example, we have the business process flow in Dynamics that we can use to help us basically progress through those individual stages. And I actually wrote down in my notes here that says, let's not talk about the funnel chart again, because I think we've discussed that a few times and how I have issues with the funnel chart itself, and how I compare it to Mercator's projection that basically overemphasizes certain areas and de-emphasizes others, and kind of gives you a completely skewed view of what the world actually looks like.
I don't care. Funnels are pretty.
So somehow people, despite all the inaccuracies and everything, people still like them because they learn how to read them. But of course, that doesn't mean we shouldn't try and do better and kind of look at what we can do better. What are some of the KPIs that we don't get when looking at that standard funnel chart or that standard pipeline chart? And one of the things that's happening when we're talking about pipeline analysis is we're actually talking about opportunities that progress through certain stages. So we move from one stage to the other, and we want to focus on where do we lose our opportunities? How much time do we spend per stage? Where do we actually win our opportunities? Where and when do we get stuck when working through these different stages? That's the information you need to be able to improve your sales pipeline and improve your sales processes.
Right.
And just looking at that funnel chart doesn't give you any of those answers, because it only gives you the information about how much is in each stage right now. So when adding the progression to it, say, if we have an opportunity that is in stage 3, it means that opportunity has actually gone through stage 1 and 2 as well. So when we have KPIs and calculations that looks at it and say, okay, how many opportunities or how much revenue progressed from, say, stage 1 to 2 and from 2 to 3, etc., we need to make the assumption that an opportunity in stage 3 has progressed through those other stages as well. And that's one of those areas you probably will need to make some assumptions about the data, because we're talking about sales data, right? And we all know who's notoriously difficult at correctly entering data into a CRM system.
Salespeople.
The salespeople, right? Lots of stuff happens. People add opportunities that begins in stage 2 or stage 3. Sometimes I've even seen people who save opportunities and have them on the side, because they don't want the revenue to go in and skew their metrics, or maybe they don't want their quotas increased, etc. So they don't add them until one of the later stages, and they feel more safe that this one's actually going to go through. So a lot of things like that happens. That you get opportunities that suddenly appear in stage 3. Sometimes you close them. When they're still in stage 2, they close them as 1. Yeah, well, we want an opportunity in stage 2. Well, which a customer could definitely come back to you early on in the sales process and say, hey, you know what, just send me the order. We're ready to go. But technically, you still go through all of those other steps. You still progress through those other stages. So your calculation kind of have to take that into account. And that's not really something that's as easy to do within Dynamics 365 itself, because we have to make that assumption that opportunity in stage 3 for our KPI calculations, we need to consider that opportunity and that value to having progressed through those other stages as well. So make a calculation on the percentage of revenue that went from stage 1 to 2, from 2 to 3, etc., and what's the loss percentage per stage. We need to make those assumptions on the data. And that's something that's fairly easy to do with Power BI and the Power BI calculations using DAS, basically just building that into your KPI so you get that progression rate from stage to stage. And that win rate and that loss rate per stage, you can actually see exactly what stage that you lose your opportunities and potentially how much time you're spending per stage. And since it's Power BI, right, you can break that down. You can easily filter it per salesperson and see if there's any notable differences, any outliers, any people in particular who brings everything to the second to last stage and then they lose everything there. Maybe they need to learn how to qualify the opportunities better so they don't continue everything. Maybe we can weed out the ones that they know are not going to work in an earlier stage, so we basically don't spend as much time on it.
So here's a question for you, Ulrik, is that to get that information about how long each opportunity was in each stage, traditionally is required taking your data to a cube of some kind where you're snapshotting it on a regular basis. Is that still required to do this? Because I noticed that Dynamics tells me on this sales process flow on the active stage how long it's been in the current stage. Does it store that data somewhere we can access it?
So the date on how much time you spent per stage, you get that nice little count and say, oh, this stage has been active for 5 minutes or X amount of days, etc. And it looks great, but it's a bit of a tease because it's only giving you the last stage. So if you go one stage back and then progress one stage forward, then it'll say, oh, this stage has been active for 1 minute. And what's being saved on the records in the background is actually only that last stage switch. So it's not collecting all of that information. You still have to collect that information somewhere else, so you have that history. And that's actually where you can use the business process flow, because now we actually have a business process flow entity that you can use for analytical purposes. And now also in preview, you can actually enable that entity for configuration. So it's not just a lockdown entity any longer. You can look it up. You can have a form. You can add fields to it. You can add relationship to it. So whenever something changes on that business process flow, you can actually, and for that instance of the business process flow, you can create additional records, create additional information about what time the state switched, how many times it's changed, and use that part of your analytical data and make that a part of your reporting and use it to see how much time you're actually spending in those individual stages.
So you could have a workflow or a process that every time you change the stage creates a related record of some kind?
Exactly. So you can add automation to it, etc. just as you would with any other entity. So that last step here, we've had the business process flow entity for a while. It's been created whenever you created a new business process flow to create that entity for you. But still in preview, if you go to the preview area in the system settings, you can enable the business process flow for configuration, so you can start making all these changes, add fields, add additional automation, etc. When something happens on changes that you doesn't necessarily apply to adding inside the business process flow editor on those state switches, you want something else that's running in the background, you can do that using the standard configuration on the business process flow entities.
Yeah, and that can work. I guess where it still gets a little bit tricky is if you have a sales process that can move forward and backward.
Right, because you need to collect all of that data, and you want to figure out how do you actually work with it. If something
like if I jump from stage 2 to 4, and then back to 1, and then up to 5, and back to 3.
Right, do you then aggregate all the data that was spent in 2, or do you disregard what happened in the past, or do you disregard something a little bit? And that's all something that applies to the business and how they want to handle it, and figure out how they want to aggregate their data and how they view their reporting, depending on what the people were doing. Right. And one challenge there is like when you have a business process flow, for example, if you have one that goes from opportunities to projects, and maybe you have one that goes from leads to opportunities to projects. One of the challenges there is that you have a lot of the business process flow that goes from leads to opportunities to projects. But if you create an opportunity directly, you don't have that originating lead, then you cannot use the lead to opportunity to project business process flow on it because it doesn't have that lead which is supposed to be a part of the business process flow. So in that case, you can actually have multiple different business process flow that support, at least from the user perspective, support the same sales process. So you also need to take that into account. So when you look at all your data in Power BI, you need to aggregate it properly, and that's where the category on the business process flow come in, because you always have that setting when you set up those business process flow in the different stages and you set up the stage name. You have this category field that's actually intended for reporting purposes and specifically for the pipeline analysis. So you can have all these different process flow that all basically maps into the same stages on an overarching sales process. So there's something to keep in mind when you set up your system, set up the user interface for it, and make sure that all of those different stages, if you have multiple different business process flow, all map back to the same category that you have identified within the business process flow.
Yeah, I see that field, and I understand the reason, but I've never seen a real-world scenario where people really have used it that way. I've always thought if you have multiple process flows and want to tie them together, why would you name these stages different things?
Right. That's the other side of it. You have it in the back end. So, and when we take the information into Power BI, we can essentially aggregate it as we want it and just use that. Either use the category as a helper, or use it as a or use our own data, our own table, to basically match up the data between the different flows. So it's only in the situation where you're actually forced to use different flows. But you're right, usually those stages would be called similar things. The only thing that I think with the categories is that when you look at the pipeline phase inside the opportunities, it adds that little number in front of the category field. Mm-hmm. I don't know if you noticed that. It automatically adds like a 1, 2, 3, etc., basically so it's easier to sort your funnel charts. But we were trying to get away from those, right? And put everything into Power BI so we can do our own sorting. And
it's very frustrating
flows,
because it'll put those in different orders in different environments. I don't know if you've had that issue, but your 1, 2, and 3 will be different in different environments depending on how you import them in. And so I think I had an old tip of the day about how to renumber them to make them consistent or something.
Right, and especially when it comes to like the regular charts, it can be difficult to order according to the option sets, because depending on how you put in the order, it can order it either according to the value of the option set, so the 1, 2, 3, or whatever the numbers might be, but there's also a way that you can do it where it orders according to the label of the option set. So you have to be a little careful on how you set it up, but actually now you have both options. There used to be a bug in there where you couldn't order them in any significant manner, but now you actually have some options in ordering those option sets within the charts. So when we have all of this data, we basically take it out, and in the case where I mentioned we take it out to Power BI, and we can create those loss rates per stage, etc. We actually have a funnel chart inside Power BI too, except it's actually very different from the one we have inside Dynamics 365. Because in Power BI, it actually doesn't skew the information. So per stage, it looks a lot more like a regular bar chart in the sense that all the different areas actually has comparatively have a comparative size to the value that it represents. So you can see the all data. It's easier to interact with. It's kind of like a much nicer funnel chart, basically the one that we should have had inside the Dynamics 365 system. So you can put all the KPIs in there, and the nice thing is that you don't necessarily need a sales stage field, etc., to break the information down. You can basically drag over all your custom KPIs with the values for the different stages that you want to use into that specific visual and essentially build each component and each stage of that funnel chart in there with your own custom filters and calculations, etc. So it gives you a lot more flexibility and a lot easier to work with data and present it properly. Now, in Power BI, so we have more options. So we want to take it a little bit further and say what kind of like custom visuals can we then use, because we are talking about flow of data, the flow of opportunities through the various stages. And a funnel chart isn't necessarily as good as for displaying the flow, but as like displaying how much information has transgressed through each of those different areas. But if in Power BI and on the visuals area, if you click on the custom visual store, basically the ... to add more visuals, you can search for a chart called the Sankey chart, Sankey, which is designed specifically to show the flow of data or the flow of something. So you can actually pan it out in a manner where you can actually see the different stages. How much are you losing per stage? How much are you winning per stage? How much is going through the next stage, etc. And really break that down in a much more visual manner than what the pipeline or the standard funnel chart could actually show you when it comes to seeing where we're losing data, where we're winning data. All of that is actually built into the Sankey chart.
So how does it know how the data is moving? Do you have to set up some kind of snapshotting? Excuse me. You set up some kind of snapshotting with this new preview feature, or are you reporting off of a cube or some kind of snapshot of data?
So with the Sankey chart, we do need that data that shows each opportunity for each state that it went through. And we have two options to create that. One is we do create a workflow as an automation that basically on every stage change, we record the information, we have the information, and we use that as a part of our cube and our data. But what we can do too in Power BI is if we haven't been recording all of that data, we can basically make assumptions about the data. And I feel you generally don't want to make too many assumptions. But as I mentioned, when it comes to sales data and type of data we're talking about, you can make assumptions that, say, an opportunity in stage 3 have gone through stage 1 and 2 in order to get to stage 3. Something that was 1 went through all the different stages. And that's essentially what we're looking for. So you can basically build that table using Power Query and grabbing basically the opportunities and say, I want all the opportunities that are currently in stage 1. I want all the opportunities that are currently in stage 1, meaning they have also transgressed through the initial stage, everything that's in stage 2. So you can basically build your data by retrieving the opportunity data, the opportunity records multiple times. So it basically applies to that formula. And all of that is done in Power Query. We're just grabbing all the data, all the opportunities for each stage that they have essentially progressed through. So you can build it in there. So even if you didn't record the data and you have lots and lots of years of old data of opportunities, you can still make those assumptions and build it into your to your model using Power Query and still get that kind of visuals and information and insights out of your data, even though if you didn't have that automation, et cetera, set up in the first place.
That's right. And I see several other common metrics people look at, not just size of the pipeline by sales rep. You might also want to look at number of deals or average deal size as well. Sometimes those can be better metrics to look at than just over, because one guy has a $3 million opportunity and nothing else. He can look like he's the big dog, but he really doesn't have the most healthy pipeline. Right.
And one particular KPI formula I like to use for that is called the sales velocity formula. I actually believe it was that term, I believe, was coined by a consultant firm that was working with a different CRM system that's competing with Dynamics 365. But that doesn't mean we can't take advantage of the formulas, right? Plus, the sales velocity formula is something that's been around for a while, but I think coining the term sales velocity is a good way of describing it, because what you're looking at is how many opportunities do you have? And what is that? What is the average value of those opportunities? And how much is your win rate as a percent? So if you take all of that information and multiply each other and then divide it by the average length of your opportunities, and you can define what the length is in this case. Are you counting months? Are you counting days? Are you counting weeks, etc.? Doesn't really matter. It depends on your business and what makes the most sense. But then what the sales velocity give you, and take that information, count of opportunities times average value times win rate, divided by the average length, basically gives you the sales velocity, meaning how fast are you actually selling? How fast are your salespeople driving? How much money, if we're looking at the per week data, for example, how much money are they turning per week with the sales velocity formula? And the great thing about it is that it breaks it down by these very specific steps. And you can actually look at it per salesperson and say, see how people are doing, or as a company, do you need more opportunities? Do you need to increase the value of your opportunities? Do you need to have enough opportunities, but you need to increase the win rate? Do we need to sell faster? And with Power BI, it's very easy to click on individual people and break out these KPIs. So you can see how everybody is doing in context of that formula, and see, maybe we have people who have a really high win percentage, but they just take way too long to close opportunities. Maybe we can work with them to increase the speed of closing the opportunities. Maybe we have people who have very few opportunities, but they're worth a lot. Maybe we have lots of people, and this is probably more common, there are people who focus on smaller opportunities instead of trying to go for the big ones. So you can really pinpoint it on a per salesperson basis and use that for your coaching and see who needs coaching in certain areas. How are people faring through the sales process? How far do they get in within the individual sales process? Because you can take that sales velocity formula and put it on the same report as the Sankey chart I was talking about earlier, and really see the flow per person and how they're doing in context of all these other parameters and KPIs, and gives you really good insight in the performance of a individual salesperson as well as the whole team and the corporation as a whole.
Well, good. That sounds a lot better than the old funnel I've been using.
Hopefully.
All right.
It'll still always have a special place.
That's right. That's right. On your blogs, in the post about why you hate funnels, right?
Exactly. I don't know what my starting point would be for a lot of presentation if I couldn't complain a little bit about the funnel chart.
Right. Okay, so we talked about analyzing data. We talked about the business process flow preview that'll help you make your sales analysis easier with extending that. And we also heard from Gus about what's coming this weekend in Atlanta for Dynamics 365 Saturday. That's a lot in one episode.
All right.
All right, thanks, Ulrik.
All right, thank you.